Good afternoon. This is Media Center, Ukraine, Odessa. We continue our work, and our next guest is Olena Kitayska, Director of the Department of Labor and Social Policy of the Odesa City Council, who will tell us about how local authorities and residents of Odessa support the veterans of Ukraine-Russia war and IDPs who reside here in Odessa. Good afternoon. The priority of local authorities is currently the social support of those who are in need, the people who were displaced from the combat zone, and those who defend our country nowadays. The city has relevant programs to support these categories of our citizens. We have the city target program of social support that was adopted 2 years ago, but our department adjusts this program according to the needs of people. Our priority is the military, who is directly involved in defending Ukraine and the population of our country. Last year, we introduced a range of measures with the amount of finance more than 50 million that envisages material support of our veterans and the families of deceased soldiers, as well as provision of the whole range of services. We also support people with disabilities who became disabled as the result of the war. The families of our military, the military can receive monthly aid, which is for the injured people and the families of deceased soldiers in the amount of 3,000 hryvnias. Those people who became disabled as a result of illness can receive 2,000 hryvnias per month. Injured soldiers with disabilities who have minor children, as well as their families with such children, can receive 500 hryvnias per month. The veterans of the anti-terrorist operation can receive this support on the monthly basis. And for our current defenders, they can receive 6,000 hryvnia per year for minor children. But we understand that the financial support is not the end of the story. That's why we have decided to introduce the following services: psychological rehabilitation for the military and the members of their families, as well as the psychological support of the families of deceased servicemen and servicewomen. These aid amounts to 16,100 hryvnias. As for the support of the professional adaptation of the military, it can be provided through the entities which are responsible for educational activities. Retired servicemen can train through the professional adaptation in the specialized centers. And the cost and the price of this adaptation is up to 25,000 hryvnias. We know that today the big amount of our servicemen and servicewomen get disabilities and the prosthesis is needed. The state guarantees these activities, but we have limitations And sometimes our military requires more functional processes for people to be able to come back to normal life, to work and to live in their families. Over the last several years, the city has been providing financial aid to people with disabilities and veterans of our wars. And now we have the possibility to pay additional payments to the people who require prostheses to the general amount of 900 minimal salaries, which is almost 2 million hryvnias. If it is needed for a person to come back to normal life. Our military today require rehabilitation and recovery after they receive treatments in healthcare institutions. After that, they require rehabilitation, and we have now opportunity to support them, and the general amount of this service can be up to 16,000 hryvnias. And there are some other issues, like barring our defenders. And during the next session of the City Council, we are going to introduce the changes to honor the memory of the deceased heroes, to create memorial cemetery for burial. We will have will have standard tombstones for everyone to remember the price we are paying to get our victory, in which we're sure. I would also like to remind that apart from the separate sections of the program, it also envisages social aid in other cases. Our veterans can get treatment or can get financial support to pay for municipal services. They should apply with the set package of documents. We can support them with treatment, or we can support them with paying for their debts. And the general amount of the program is more than 500 million of hryvnias. This program envisages additional guarantees to the state ones because our department also has delegated functions to provide state guarantees. We issue certificates with people with disabilities as the result of the war to the families of deceased heroes. After the certificate is provided, a person gains the relevant status and can use the local and state benefits. To get such status, they should address the Social Protection Directorate. With the beginning of the full-scale invasion, we have been accommodating IDPs from such regions as Kherson Oblast, Mykolaiv Oblast, as well as Donetsk. These are the regions with the biggest amount of IDPs. Odessa is primarily a transit city, but a lot of these IDPs stay in Odessa as in a temporary or permanent place of residence. Since the 24th of February last year, we have registered around 70,000 people who have decided to stay in Odesa. These people need support in all areas. First of all, when it comes to registration of their status, they can get status through DIA app without the need of physical addressing to the governmental authorities. There is the list of cities in the combat zone, which was published by the Ministry of Reintegration, and such people from that regions can get state support after they receive the status of IDPs. For people to feel safe in Odesa, we offer a great number of different events. Since after the full-scale invasion started, following the order of the mayor of Odesa, there was conducted a coordination meeting with representatives of local authorities and civil society. We made a decision to coordinate our activities when it comes to rendering humanitarian aid to IDPs. 4 humanitarian centers were established in the city with representatives of the social territorial centers, volunteer and organizations, and NGOs. During the period of martial law, more than 500,000 food packages and self-care products have been provided to people, and we have such humanitarian centers in all districts. Another important topic for IDPs is employment. Following the order of the city mayor in June last year, in the Integrated Social Service Center in Kosevskaya Street, we opened the employment center for IDPs. We employ people in our communal and municipal enterprises, local authorities. The list of jobs is constantly updated. There are almost 1,000 jobs in these institutions. Unemployed can refer to the center to be consulted by our bodies and to get job. Since June of last year, almost 800 IDPs have got employment in organizations providing healthcare services, educational services, and those who generally support the state of our city. We don't have separate events for IDPs because we believe that those people staying in Odesa and have the IDP status can make use of all the services which have been provided to Odesa residents. If a person needs financial support, or if a person needs some social service, for example, home care or inpatient care, they can address to the relevant bodies as a citizen of Odesa to get any type of such support. I'd like to remind that the aid provided through the municipal budget is adopted by the special council. There is also a coordination council which is responsible for paying debts for municipal services, and thus we ensure social guarantee on behalf of the city. All the payments guaranteed by the program are provided on time. We understand that for IDPs, when it comes to IDPs, there is one more important issue, which is accommodation. And this is quite a difficult question for our city because we do not have some free development pool in our cities. But the city was able to buy apartments for the families of IDPs and people with disability. Our service center also allocated the premises of the square 1,500 square meters. By the end of July, we plan to open the IDP centers, where, apart from accommodation, they will be able to get psychological, social, and legal support. So, sorry for interrupting, but we already have a lot of questions. And I would like to ask about these premises of 1,500 square meters. This is a two-story building in 5 Chemichna Street that can accommodate 100 persons. They can not only reside there, but there are also rooms for different types of events and training, and also to ensure rehabilitation of these people. And to finalize the part dedicated to IDPs, I would like to remind that in 2D Kosovska Street, in this integrated social service center, under the initiative of the government and Vice Prime Minister in European integrated and the government ombudsman on gender issues, with the support of the UN fund and its partner, our local NGO Vera Nadia Lyubov. We have opened this center for rescued people, primarily for IDPs, where IDPs can get psychological support, legal support, and other types of consultations. And if needed, the center can refer these people to other municipal institutions to solve their issues. Before the 1st of May, we worked at the railway station, which was a transit point for people heading to safer places. We have referred to more than 50,000 people to other regions. But taking into consideration the fact that the amount of IDPs referring to us has decreased, we have made a decision that these people can address the center at in Kosovska Street. To make it easier for IDPs to find their way in the city, we have special signs, special boards with the relevant telephone numbers. They can call to address with their issues. These are the telephone numbers of front offices where they can be registered, healthcare institutions, employment centers, and NGOs like Red Cross, etc. So these are the telephone numbers of all organizations who are involved in supporting IDPs. And IDPs can call them to get consulted and to solve their issues. This is the general information, and I expect now a lot of questions, and I am ready to answer them. Let's get to the questions. I have a question which was sent by the journalist, and this is now the quote. What is the coordination with the municipal authorities to accommodate IDPs in permanent and not temporary housing? Are you going to build some new houses, or will you use the houses that have been already built? And with which departments do you coordinate this issue? Generally, these issues are solved at the level of the regional military administration. As for our city, we have the Capital Construction Directorate, which is responsible for the issue, so you should better refer to them. As for the Labor and Social Policy Department, we have been appointed as the responsible body according to the decree of the Cabinet of Ministers to provide temporary accommodation for IDPs. That was the question of Vera Zaporozhets. And now my question. There is no coordination between your department and the Capital Construction Department to provide permanent accommodation for IDPs. Before the full-scale invasion, I made inquiry to find information about social housing for IDPs, and in Odessa there were less than 10 apartments, and I couldn't understand how that was possible, taking into consideration the amount of new houses which are built in Odessa. You know that there have been changes to the development law, and the city could not receive such houses. That's why we cannot accommodate people in the new houses. As for the construction, if we are able to construct the house, it will be provided to the relevant funds for the accommodation of IDPs. And what about the temporary accommodation of IDPs? Who selects those people who can get this temporary accommodation? There is the decree of the Cabinet of Ministers that strictly and clearly regulates the dissemination of the apartments or housing for IDPs. As for the temporary accommodation, which we are responsible for, there is a score system to define priorities. So the first group are families with children, families with people with disabilities, retired people who lost their housing as the result of combat activities in other regions. People should apply with the relevant package of documents, which is clearly mentioned by the decree of the Cabinet of Ministers. Using these documents, we calculate the score and make our decision according to the score. If the families have the same score, the priority is those who have submitted the document package first. As for social housing, there is also a queue or a line which is formed according to the applications of people. If a person has an IDP status, is he or she in a priority group? We have IDP housing, which are only for IDPs, and social housing for all vulnerable groups. Here, IDPs have no priority according to the current legislation. And this legislation also envisages other benefits. You've mentioned a very important issue, retraining of the military, who before the 24th February last year just wanted to opt to social job. And of course, this is not the option for them now. But who assess the success of the mentioned programs? Is it your department or the audit or an audit company? Because when it comes to retraining, not everyone becomes successful, but the money from the budget has been already spent. We cannot say that after retraining, people select the jobs they trained for, because the market cannot always offer the those jobs that people would like to have. So the assessment is conducted once per 3 years. As for the further destiny of people who undergo retraining or training, we try to monitor the situation to understand if the person has used the received knowledge in the future. If the person does not uses the knowledge, we recommend to address again to the employment center for us to help this person with the employment. But there is no like mandatory task. Such an audit could help assess the real labor market. Because the training offered can be not in line with the real demand in the market when it comes to the popular jobs. When it comes to some obligatory jobs, then they could be provided through the state employment center. If the person opts for retraining, this is up for the person to select the job. Yes, but the budget, the state budget funds or the local budget funds are used. Yes, of course, this is clear, but this is up for the person to select the job and to choose the training institution. There are special requirements to such institutions. For us to be able to conclude agreement with this, such an institution, the person understands that the money is spent from the budget, and the service provider is also aware of this fact. But we do not require from a person to return this money. If the person undergoes training but is not able to find a job, then unfortunately we cannot monitor this. This is not a question to the trainees, but this is more the question about the state program. I'd like to emphasize that we do not have the list of jobs for training. This is up person to decide. We can all just recommend the priority jobs at the market, like labor jobs. But if the person wants to get another qualification, we cannot interfere with this, because the person selects on his or her own. I have one more question about processes. And I know that there is the decree of the Cabinet of Ministers also of 2016 establishing prices. They were updated, but not dramatically. Those people who are involved in combat activity, they can get the state support for more functional processes, and we understand that there is a great number of such people, and the city must support them. That's why in our municipal program we envisaged such additional payment. So we just add payment to the price of the processes that will help people to live on and to go even into for the sports. How many people have been supported over the last year when it comes to processes from the municipal budget? And what amount of people do you envisage in general? I cannot tell you about this, because we cannot define the average price. But there is some budget envisaged, right? Yes. For this year, we have envisaged around 20 million, but we can't say about the amount of people. So we can say that the limit is 900 minimal salaries. But the price for different people is different, and the general amount, yes, is 20 million. We have not provided such support this year, and we didn't have that envisaged in our program during the last year. And now the executive committee has to adopt the decision, and there are representatives of the people's deputies and the state authorities. Not only the application will be taken into consideration, but also the possibilities of the applicant. Unfortunately, not all people will be able to get this support. And sometimes we cannot help them with the prosthesis they want because of the health indication. And if the committee has representatives like people's deputies, they cannot take into consideration medical issues. Not always people can use more functional prostheses because of the health conditions. So we need to have conclusion of doctors and of the supplier of such device. Can it be any type of supplier or only from Odesa? No, this is up for a person to select a supplier or a manufacturer. The events that I've mentioned, rehabilitation, prosthesis, then recreation treatment, in all these cases, a person selects an institution by him or herself. So we need to conclude a trilateral agreement, but this is up for the person to decide where to make use of the rate. We have one more question from Vera Zaporozhets. And this is not the topic of our briefing for today. We are planning this for the future, but till we're having you here today. This is the question about monitoring of the accessibility and inclusiveness for people with disabilities in Odessa. Do you plan to improve the situation? Yes, perhaps actually maybe there is an indirect, but there is still relation to our today's topic, because we have a lot of people with disabilities now who need to have access not only to social premises, but also they need to have access to healthcare institutions and their accommodation. Last year, we have the meeting with the deputy of the municipal Filatova and Badurets. We also had the representatives of the relevant municipal departments and the representative of the government ombudsman when it comes to protection of people with disabilities. And during the meeting, we discussed the most important issues for people with disabilities. This is accessibility outdoors, in transportation, and in different institutions. Following the results of the meeting, we have defined the deadline, and of course we understand that we cannot improve the situation in the city in one day, but we need to take gradual measures. The people can see the changes in the streets, but there is still a lot of room for the improvement. Together with the NGOs representing people with disabilities, every year we define the events that should be implemented during the year. And of course, we agree this issue with NGOs representing people with disabilities. Thank you. Thank you for the information provided. Thank you for being with us here today. We hope to see you to have you with us in the future. Just a week and a half ago, we discussed the issues of disabilities, and I would like to continue this dialogue. There is the Rivnis program, equality program, for the upcoming 3 years. Of course, we will need to update the program because of the war, but the life continues, and we need to continue our work. Thank you. Thank you for your time. Thank you. I would like to thank journalists for their attention to this briefing. Our next briefing will be in 25 minutes, and it will be dedicated to the situation with transportation and logistics in Odessa and in Ukraine and in the world in general. It will be dedicated to Green Deal in particular. Stay tuned.